Hi and welcome to this Key Learning Initiative video. Today's topic is sketching linear equations, and we're going to do this using the table method. So sketching graphs. There are many different ways to draw graphs. Today we're looking at the table method. Let's get right into it. Sketch the following graph. Y equals 2x minus 2. On our left hand side we've got our Cartesian plane where we're going to eventually draw it. But we're using the table method, so we start off with our table. Basically what we do here is we have x values, we put them in the equation, we get our y values and we fill it in on the table. So let's do this. Firstly, we write down the equation. In this case it's y equals 2x minus 2. Then we take our first x value in our table and we substitute it into our equation. And so now we have y equals 2 and then in brackets negative 2 minus 2. Okay, then we solve for y. So 2 times negative 2 is negative 4, and so we have y equals negative 4 minus 2. And that means y equals negative 6. And we take the negative 6 and we put it under the negative 2 in the table. Brilliant. First x and y values done. Now we look at the second one. We follow the same structure. We write down the equation. Then, in place of x, we put the negative 1. And so we get y equals 2 times negative 1 minus 2. That means that we have y minus 2 and then subtract 2 from that. Y equals negative 4, and we take the negative 4 and we put it under the negative 1. Great. Now again we do the same thing, but in this case we use 0 in place of our x. Alright, so we have y equals 2 times 0 minus 2, which means y equals 0 minus 2, y equals minus 2. We take the minus 2 and we write it in the block under the 0. I hope you can see a pattern here. Let's carry on. Write down our equation. We take our x value, in this case it's 1, we fill it in place of x. So we have y equals 2 times 1 minus 2, y equals 2 minus 2, and so y equals 0. We put our answer there under our 1. Our last one, again we write down our equation. We take our x value and we substitute it into our equation. Then we multiply it out, so 2 times 2 is 4, and then subtract 2, and that means y is equal to 2. We fill it in the table. And now our table is complete, and we're going to use these to draw our graph. So let's look at our first two values in our table, where x is negative 2 and y is negative 6. And so we plot that point on our Cartesian plane. Next point, negative 1, negative 4. Again, we plot that on our Cartesian plane. Our third point, 0, negative 2, and we plot that. Our fourth point, 1, 0, we plot that. Our last point is 2, 2, and again, we plot that. Next, we draw a line through all the dots. Lastly, we label the graph. Notice that there are arrows at the end and beginning of the line, okay, or the top and the bottom. Alright, please don't forget the arrows, don't forget to label your graph. A check here. If one of your dots doesn't fit on the line, there's probably a mistake. Let's look at our second example. Here it says sketch the following graph. 2y minus 3x equals 6. Now this is not in the standard form, but we do it the same way. We're using the table method, so we use a table. In this table, I'm only using 3 x values, -2, 0, and 2. As you get better at it, you'll be able to choose numbers that work well for your x value. If you used 1 and -1, you'd end up with terrible fractions. So here we're using -2 and 2. Let's get into it. We write down our equation. We take our first x value, which is -2, and we substitute it in place of x. So we have 2y minus 3 times -2 equals 6. And now we solve for y. So that means I have 2y minus 3 times -2 is plus 6 equals 6. I subtract 6 from both sides, and so I have 2y equals 0. And then I divide both sides by 2, and I have y equals 0. And so now I write my 0 under my -2. Let's do the next two parts of the table. I write down my equation. Then I take my next x value and I substitute it in. Now I solve for y. 2y equals 6, and I get that because -3 times 0 is just 0. Lastly, I divide both sides by 2, and I get y equal to 3. And I put 3 back in my table. My last value for my table. I write down my equation. I take my 2 and I substitute it into the equation. Now I solve for y. So I get 2y minus 6 equals 6. To get rid of that minus 6 on the left hand side, I add 6 to both sides, and so I get 2y equals 12. To get y by itself, I divide both sides by 2, and I get y equals 6. I take that 6 and I put it just under the 2, and now my table is complete. So let's draw the graph. My first point, -2, 0. I plot that point. My second point, 0, 3. Again, I plot that point. My last point, 2, 6, and I plot that point. Now I've got my 3 points. I take my ruler and I draw a line through all 3 dots. Notice there's an arrow at the top and the bottom, or the beginning and the end of the line. Lastly, I label my line or my graph. So there it is. I've drawn my graph. Things to remember, and these are 4 important things. Let's look at the first one. Use easy numbers for your x values in your table. As I said, you'll get better at it, but normally the lower the value, or the closer to 0, the better. If you start using 10 or 20 or 30 as your x value, it often gets very big very quickly. Next, when you draw the line of your graph, always check that all the points are on that line. It's very easy to make a stupid mistake somewhere, but if your points are all on the line, then hopefully no stupid mistakes. Make sure you put arrowheads at both ends of the line. And lastly, always label the line you have just sketched or drawn. And so thank you for watching this key learning initiative on sketching linear equations using the table method. Please guys, if you would like and share, join my channel so that you can get more and more maths, and hopefully we can improve your maths mark as we go along. I hope this has been helpful. Have a really excellent day.